If you cross paths with Susan Bennett, you might not guess what her claim to worldwide fame was, and that would be just fine with this voice actor who considers herself an introvert. Chances are, though, you've heard her thank you for flying with Delta Airlines or telling you where to go from your car's GPS. But as the original voice of Siri, Apple's virtual assistant, Susan was forced out of the recording booth and into the limelight. I'm Gail O'Neill. Join me and my producer, Felipe Barral, as Susan Bennett talks about artificial intelligence, the fundamentals of concatenation, don't worry, she'll explain, and Siri's early reputation for snarky clapbacks. All that coming up on this episode of Collective Knowledge, because spreading knowledge is the most altruistic thing we can do as human beings. Tell me how you got your start in using your voice at any stage in life.
Well, I've always played music. I could play the piano from the time I was 4. I could just sit down and pick out little tunes.
By ear?
So, yes, by ear. So I've always been interested in music, but I didn't really start using my voice for music until high school. And I got into doing musical theater there and continued doing more in college. And then after college, I got married and ended up moving to Atlanta. And I ended up doing a lot of different singing and playing in clubs and restaurants and doing a lot of studio work as a vocalist. And that's how I ended up getting into voice work, which was, we had sung a jingle for a particular product one day and the voice actor didn't show up to read the copy of the spot. So the owner of the studio, Doppler Studios, Pete Caldwell, said, "Susan, you don't have an accent. Come over here and read this copy." And so I did, and I thought, oh, ding, 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 I can do this.
You were from New England, Vermont, and
Yes.
you've lived in Rhode Island, other places in New England, yet did you ever have a regional accent?
I did. I had a very strong New England accent as a kid.
Say it in a strong New England accent. I want to hear
pack
that.
my car and have it yad.
Okay, yeah, that's a strong accent.
Yes. And I had that accent, and fortunately for a future voice actor, my parents moved to upstate New York, where the accent is quite neutral. They have a tiny bit of like a broad A that you hear when you're going to the Midwest.
Right.
They have a tiny bit of that, but for the most part, it's a pretty neutral accent. So I was able to lose my New England accent, you know, because if for anyone watching your show, it's great to be able to do a New England accent, but you don't really want to have any regional accent that you can't speak without as a voice actor, because it's just too limiting.
That's right. That's right. It pegs you. Can you do other accents? If I ask you to do a Midwestern accent, a Chicago accent, a Valley girl,
Well, I can do some accents, but you know, usually if I'm going to do a particular accent, I like to be able to have time to listen to it and really get into it. Because the difficulty with accents, it's easy to do like 1 or 2 sentences, but it's really, really hard to keep it consistent.
Right.
You know, because you can hear, a lot of times, I think the New England accent is one of the hardest, because you hear famous and excellent actors trying to do that accent, and very few really succeed at it. It's a tough one.
And of course, only a small pocket of the country would say, that is not a Boston accent.
Right.
The rest of us are like, oh, sounds like he's from South
sounds
Boston.
Cool.
Sounds close enough. So when you made the transition from singing, musical theater, to being a voice actor, how did that change? How did your approach change? What did you have to learn? And what were you doing intuitively that contributed to your success as a voice actor?
Well, I think there are a lot of voice actors that come from music. They also come from acting, of course, and DJing and that sort of thing. But I think that it's easier for people who are musical to do something like voice acting, because it does require a certain amount of rhythm. You've got to be able to have a certain, and you have to be able to speak at a certain pace so that you can read, like commercials especially, in either 15 seconds, 30 seconds, or 60 seconds. And so, you know, just that whole rhythmic thing is an important.
And not garble your words. How do you do that? How do you get words out quickly? Do you do vocal exercises before you go in the sound booth?
Yeah, you can do some, yeah.
Can we hear them?
Oh, well, I love to do the one that's
and
just
that
kind of warms everything up, and it's silly at the same time. So,
right.
You know, how can you resist silly?
What would you say was your first break in doing voiceover work, where you thought, you know, I can make a career of this. I'm good at this, I feel good doing this, and I'm having fun.
Yeah. You know, it's really funny, but I never looked at it that way. And I've never thought of myself as having achieved a certain level. Because most people doing this work are freelancers. We never exactly know where the next job is coming from. And so we have that sort of approach that we just keep striving. And so that's what I did. I just kept striving, and I did a lot of work over the years, you know, between radio and TV commercials and doing a lot of narrations for documentaries and films, and yeah.
What are some of the more popular spots you've done that we could recognize?
Oh boy, you would ask that. Well, in the past, I really have done just about anyone you could think of. You know, I've done McDonald's ads and Coca-Cola and Papa John's Pizza, and just a lot of different things.
And what is required? Does the job change with each client, or are they all essentially looking for the same thing? And if so, what is that thing?
It's different, and advertising goes in spurts too, with different trends. You know, now the trend is away from anything that sounds like an announcer. They don't want people to sound professional now. And so they want someone that sounds like the guy next door.
Okay.
You know, and that changes periodically. And then a lot of times you'll have crazy characters that they'll do, you know. And so every job is different, which is one of the reasons that being a voice actor is really fun.
Any cartoons under your resume, under your belt?
Well, I worked for someone who did a website called clauskids.com. And it was just really a wonderful little website for kids to learn music and all different things, but it's sort of Santa Claus and Christmas related. And I did 3 different voices for them. I did a little elf called Star.
Hi, I'm Star. I live up at the North Pole with Santa and Mrs. Claus.
And then there was Mrs. Pizzell,
And she was from New York City, and she kind of talked like this.
It's a good New York accent. I'm from New York.
Yep. And I think my favorite was the ancient tree conifer. Oh, I'm so delighted that you came to visit me in my forest today. I've so enjoyed our conversation.
How long does it take for these do the voices come to you, or do you try a series of different voices until something sticks?
There are some voices that just come very naturally to me, you know, like the evil queen, you know, and I really do think I need to be the next Maleficent, but.
Why not? Have you done anything for Disney?
No, unfortunately, that's a really tough gig to break into. When I revealed myself as the voice of Siri, I got a fabulous agent in Los Angeles, Wes Stevens at Vox, and Tom Lawless, a fabulous team of agents there. And I said, well, you know, I really love to do cartoons. Now that I've got a Los Angeles agent, it might be kind of fun to do that. He said, well, we tell people that are trying to break into this to give it 5 years. And I'm going, oh.
All right, so it's been about, let's see, 2011 you were the voice of Siri, and you came out in what, 2013?
13, yeah.
It's interesting we refer to this as coming out, Susan. What was there to come out to? What was that process like?
Well, I didn't know that I was the voice of Siri until Siri appeared on October 4th, 2011. And a fellow voice actor emailed me and said, hey, we're playing around with this new iPhone app. Isn't this you?
Yeah.
And I went, what? So I went on the Apple site and listened, and yes, that was my voice, and I was completely shocked. I think I love the English word gobsmacked.
Yes, that about sums it up.
Gobsmacked is what I was. And I just thought, what do I do about this? This is crazy. Because, you know, I had very ambivalent feelings. Because on one hand, I was thinking, well, wow, I'm basically the new voice of Apple. I mean, how cool is that?
Yes.
And then I'm thinking, yeah, but you know, I didn't know anything about it. I've never worked directly for Apple. I never got a check from Apple. So who's this Siri person?
So how did Apple get your voice if you never recorded for them?
Well, this may be a shock to some people, but there was more than one original voice of Siri. I believe mine was the original English voice worldwide. But as the iPhone went into different countries with different languages, they utilized different actors, you know, who are speaking in different languages. And I've been in touch with some of those other people, and we all had the same experience, which was we didn't really know what we were doing, because most of the work that we did, the work that I did, that became the basic vocabulary for Siri, was in 2005. And then Siri didn't appear till 2011. And I was told specifically that what I was doing was just sort of generic recording for phone systems. And I said, well, gee, this, you know, I'm signing this contract. I'm not sure about these. Oh, don't worry about it. It's just phone systems. Oh. And the thing that made it difficult is that when you hear a person doing you call a place and you're hearing the voice on the phone system, you don't notice it because you're looking for the information that the voice is disseminating, right? You
rather
don't,
impatiently too. Dial push 1 for whatever.
Yeah, so you're listening for specific stuff.
Yeah.
So what happens when this anonymous voice becomes a persona like Siri, and people are interacting with that voice many times a day, suddenly your voice becomes known to these people whether they realize it or not. And so it took me a long time to reveal myself as the voice of Siri because I knew it was going to have an impact on my career.
But I would think that would be a good impact, and wouldn't you want that as a voiceover artist?
That was one possibility.
Okay, what was the other possibility?
Well, the other possibility is that it's just too, it's everywhere. You know, the voice, millions of people are talking to this voice every day, and so it's kind of overkill in a way.
Oh, so overexposure is a bad thing for a voiceover artist.
Yeah.
But you can change your voice. That's the beauty of what you do. You can sound like an old tree or a little kid.
Well, that's another thing too that's negative about being typecast, is that, you know, people, especially in this ADD culture that we have now, people aren't going to take the time to look into what else I can do. They're going to say, oh, she's Siri. Okay, well, never mind.
Oh, okay. That never occurred to me.
Yeah.
So there's a failure of imagination among some people who are casting voices.
Some, yeah.
It took you 2 years to come out? Mm-hmm. What ushered you out the door? What was the final straw?
Well, all during this time, when I was trying to make up my mind what I should do about it, because I'm basically an introvert, and so I was thinking, well, gee, I don't know what can of worms I'm opening up by doing this. But my husband and my son, they just kept saying, you are missing this incredible opportunity. This is such a unique opportunity. You are really, you're an idiot, basically. And so after they're badgering me for a couple of years, I finally thought, you know, you're absolutely right. I really just need to make a leap of faith and just do this thing. And, you know, it's worked out great.
Was part of your hesitation in coming out, you know, there are people who can fall in love with a voice and visualize what that voice, who she is, was that part of your hesitation?
Yes, I think so, because, you know, Siri was such an iconic thing. I mean, when she came out, she was the first concatenated voice that sounded human, and you could interact with her, and you could play with her. She had a personality. Right. She really did. She could come back with some really amazing zingers. Yeah, she really could. And people loved that. And so they would play with her and talk with her. And, you know, I was concerned about that because, especially with the movie Her, you know, they're talking to this AI and it's Scarlett Johansson. I'm going, well, you know, they would expect her to be Scarlett Johansson, and then Her turns out to be, well, not quite Scarlett Johansson.
Have people said to you, gee, I thought you would look like Scarlett Johansson, or I thought you'd look like...
No, no, they really don't. People have actually been very, very nice. And people just are excited to see that there's a human behind the voice.
Yes, yeah.
My feeling is that there's a right time for things. And it just wasn't time for me to do it. I did it in my own time. And yes, maybe I lost out on something, but maybe not, you know. And so I was very happy with having made the decision to do it. I ended up meeting a lot of really interesting people and having some very cool jobs.
Giving a TED Talk?
TED Talk was one of the things.
That must have been a hell of an experience for an introvert.
Yeah.
Were you freaking out?
Well, you know, I've always been a performer, so I can rise to the occasion when necessary. But, you know, for a limited amount of time. You know, I don't have the ta-da gene.
Right. Yeah, tell us about that. I think a lot of people are puzzled by people who are introverted who can then get out there and perform.
Well, you know, a lot of people have talked about that. I think Beyonce has talked about the fact that she has this alter ego.
Sasha Fierce.
Yeah, and you just sort of become another person on stage.
Okay. So are you being another person now, or is this Susan?
No, this is me.
All right, this is you.
I'm being myself.
Did you own an iPhone by the time
I did.
Your voice came out?
Yes.
And are you an iPhone lover? Like, are you one of these technology people, or do you kind of like
I
have it in your life
not-
because you have to?
I am not a techie.
Okay.
Definitely not a techie. In fact, I did an interview for a tech magazine one year, and they followed up with an email and said, we're asking all of our interviewees to give us their favorite tech tip. And I'm going, you know, because I consider myself as having a good sense of humor, and I wrote back and I said, well, you asking me for a tech tip is kind of like you asking a vegan for a barbecue recipe. And I said, oh, wait, I have a tip. Try not to hit the wrong button.
That's key. That is key.
I never heard back from them.
Oh, so
I
they
think
didn't publish your...
I think they thought I was, you know...
Being snarky?
Yeah, being snarky.
Well, you know, speaking of snarky,
Yeah.
Siri had a reputation
Yes.
for being a little snarky in
Yes.
the early days. What was
Yes.
that about?
I don't know. I don't know. But she really did have an attitude. You know, but I thought that was one of the charming things about Siri and what really set her apart from other digital voices.
Well, I can tell you, if my husband is any indication, people really get involved with Siri, sometimes to the profane level. I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
is it really necessary to talk to Siri that way?
Right.
But there was a human element to the voice that was new for the
Right.
time. I'm not techie at all, so you will have to
Right.
explain exactly what that is, what the term was for.
Okay, well, let me tell you about the recording process.
Yes.
We read thousands of phrases and sentences that were created just for sound, just to get all of the sound combinations in the language.
Okay.
And so we had to read a bunch of phrases that made absolutely no sense.
For example?
Because, well, cow hoist in the tub hut today.
You sound just like Siri.
Say schist fresh issue today. Fossa, ask fussy. And then there was repetitive stuff like, say the shrouding again, say the shrading again, say the shriding again, say the shreeding again, say the shredding again, say the shredding again. And so I like to say that the years that I did these recordings up, I had a little brain damage, I think.
I'm wondering how you remember it from 13 years ago.
Well, I just picked out some of the funnier ones.
But you remember them. Were you dreaming this stuff at night? Was it like an earwig, a bad song you can't get out of your head?
No, not really. But it was very, very tedious stuff. And the first recordings that I did, the first recordings were 4 hours a day, 5 days a week.
Wow. For
an
how many
entire
a day?
month.
Wow.
Yeah. The recordings that I did that became Siri also became a lot of other things.
Oh.
So, you know, you will hear my voice sometimes on GPS systems.
I knew I heard you on my GPS.
That's
I'm
right.
sure I have.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
I've heard you at Delta Airlines.
Yes.
Let me hear that voice.
Thank you for flying Delta Airlines.
That's you.
Yep.
Tell me about the name of Siri. Where does that come from, the name Siri?
Okay, well, I've heard two stories. One is that Siri is just an acronym for Speech Interpretation Recognition Interface.
Kind of cold.
And of course, that's no fun at all.
Yeah.
And the other story is that one of Siri's creators, oh, that's another thing that people are really shocked, is that Apple did not create Siri. They purchased the app and developed it, of course. But there were 3 engineers and their teams, I'm sure, Adam Chair, Tom Gruber, and a man named Dag Kitlaus from Norway. Those are the 3 engineers that actually created Siri. Now, Dag Kitlaus, the second story about where Siri got her name is that Dag Kitlaus named her. And the story is that he and his wife were expecting a baby during a time that he was working on the app. And they had chosen the name Siri for a baby girl. Well, the baby turned out to be a boy, so the app got the name instead. And Siri in Norwegian means beautiful woman who guides you to victory.
I like that story.
Yeah.
I think we should
Of course,
stick
we
with
know
that
her
one.
better as a feisty chick who tells you where to go.
Yes. Do you listen to, well, no, I guess none of us listen to Siri anymore, but when you had her, did you listen to your own voice, or did you
No, I
turn
never
her into a
talked to
British
her.
woman? Or a...
No, I never talked to her when she had my voice. It was just too creepy. You know, I was used to hearing my voice on radio and TV and, you know, sometimes in, you know, movie theaters or something, but to speak to the you know, disembodied voice in my little iPhone and have it, my voice speaking back to me. No.
So you
I
never got
talk to
accustomed it.
myself enough as it is.
And what is cacophony?
Oh, yes. concatenation. That's what I meant to get into when I was talking about the recordings. All those sentences that we read for sound, everything had to be articulated very well and read sort of in a monotone so that all of the sounds would be similar and in the same tone of voice and the same pacing, because after the recordings were done, technicians and computers would go into the recordings, extract sounds, and reform these sounds into new phrases and sentences, and these are what ended up on our devices. In the 7 years that Siri has been in existence, the change is really incredible, and the change of all the other voices that you hear now. You know, Alexa and the Google voice and all those different voices, they are sounding more and more and more human. And, you know, we seem to be heading to that complete artificial intelligence a lot faster than I ever would have thought.
That's right. I was going to ask how the consumer is responding to this. Are we becoming more demanding? Are we becoming more discerning? Are our ears more sensitive to sound? And why are there so many female voices? Now that I think of it, there's no Alexa. It's all female voices, the primary.
My theory about that is that Siri started off as a phone system, a very sophisticated computerized phone system, but still a phone system. We used her basically for a phone. When we first got the iPhone, it's an iPhone. And traditionally phone operators were female. And I think that's one thing. But another thing too is that for the most part, I think female voices are maybe easier to listen to for a long period of time. They're maybe more soothing.
It depends on the female who's talking, Susan.
Yes, it depends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Susan, do you know the other series?
I have met the Australian Siri, and I have emailed with the first iPhone voice in England, and that was a male voice. He was Daniel. The first Siri was Daniel in England, and it was a famous BBC announcer, John Briggs.
Wow.
Yep.
And the Siri who's the female Siri you met? Where was she from?
Australia.
Australia?
She lives in New York, though.
Was she completely anonymous, or was she like you? She had a career in voice acting?
Yeah, she's a singer also, and plays the piano, and as I do, and we met. We had a great time.
Do you still sing? Do you still play the piano?
Oh yes. Yeah, I'm married to a guitar player. I sing and play keyboard and keyboard bass.
Do you perform?
Yeah.
Where people can see you?
We do.
Any venues coming or any dates coming up in
well,
like
we do
this
some
winter?
private parties, but the regular band that we have that we're having fun with now is called Boomers Gone Wild.
Love that.
And we play 60s and 70s rock and soul music.
Do you guys have a website?
We don't. No.
Susan.
Yeah.
This is bad. You should at least have a website. Boomers Gone Wild.
Boomers Gone Wild.
All right. So we'll just Google you and find you.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I noticed that when you do your voice acting, it's like you're an actor because your eyes change, your face changes, your arms are flailing and so on. Did that come to you instinctively, or were you trained? At any point, did you study voice acting?
Well, when I started to do voice acting, as I said, I kind of fell into it
you got
by
tossed
accident.
in there.
And so I did take some voice coaching from Stuart Culpepper, who was a famous actor here in Atlanta, and he also did a lot of voice work, so I took some classes with him. And basically, it was kind of an instinctual thing for me. I was sort of just able to do it. And I think that came from the music background. It just was a natural instinct too. And I've always loved to read. And I can remember when I was a little kid in second grade, this was at a time when kids used to just play until they went to school. They didn't have kids reading at 3 and 4 years of age. So we were
reading in utero?
Yeah. And so I was so impressed by this little girl in our second grade class, that Nancy Lawton, I still remember her name, because she could just open a book and just flawlessly read, without making a mistake. And and I just thought, oh, I want to do that. Yeah. And so that's ironic that I did end up doing that. So
you talked earlier about the female voice, some female voices being very soothing. Tell me what role beauty plays in the voice, in the way that you use your voice, and what you want to project and what you want to leave listeners with.
Well, I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I guess. But I think from a voice standpoint, you would think of, for me anyway, I would think of a softer, kind of gentler voice that would have that would be more of a beautiful tone in my mind. You know,
Rather than the woman talking like this. You know, this is not particularly beautiful.
When you do this, and Meryl Streep comes to mind, or she comes to my ear.
oh, well,
Her tones.
she's a great person to come. Yes, she can do anything.
She's the alpha and
she,
omega.
She really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, she
What
can
are
do
the
anything.
voices do you admire, whether in acting, singing, opera, theater?
What, other voices?
Voices, yeah.
Oh, well, I'll tell you, I think my favorite singer is Mariah Carey, which is going to be surprising to some people. She's just got it in just an unparalleled set of vocal cords. She really does.
Because of
She
her
can
octave range?
Oh, it's just not the octave range, but she's very soulful, and now she does a lot of stuff that I probably wouldn't choose. I would really love to hear her do some really classic, standard songs.
Yeah.
Because she's got such an amazing instrument. But I love, another one of my favorite singers is Patty Austin.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
And she's fabulous.
She's also hilariously funny. I've seen her perform live here in Atlanta
Oh,
at
really?
Chastain Park.
Oh,
Yeah, she was here
okay.
several years ago, and she's very, very funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she was on so many recordings of Quincy Jones's, and so if she's good enough for Quincy, she's good enough for anybody.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm thinking of, this show is called Collective Knowledge, and the idea is to collect the knowledge of people like you, people doing interesting things, and giving us 3 tips that keep you ticking, that keep you motoring forward. And I think maybe your tips might have to do with taking a leap of faith, jumping, something that you never thought you would do. Would you say that's your thing, or that
Yes,
you can
and
offer?
I think that perhaps the tips that I would think of for myself at this stage of my career is going to be different than the 3 tips I might give someone who's in their 20s.
Okay, no, we want it from where you are now, because there are
Yeah.
many people exactly where you are.
Well, I think that especially now in the voiceover industry, there's so much competition. I think one tip would be to get really, really good at what you're doing. That means be able to read anything, in the amount of time that you're supposed to read it, get used to reading all different things, practice reading, magazines and books which haven't been written to be read aloud, and get used to just, and try to improve your vocabulary so that whatever you have to read, you can feel confident about reading it. And so I would say, just really work on your skills always. And in fact, I've been doing this for decades, and I'm still taking voice classes with, a woman in Los Angeles. And just because from doing so much of this, documentary reading, narrations, and Siri type stuff, I felt like I was getting into a rut. And so I worked with her to try to break out of that a little bit more, because I still do auditions.
Okay.
You still have to audition for your work. So I would say really, really, really get good at what you do. Work on your skills. Don't be afraid to just jump in. And especially, I know doing auditions now can be kind of intimidating because there isn't anyone there to direct you.
Right.
I mean, you have a description of what they're looking for, but many times they don't really know themselves, and they're kind of hoping that you'll do this amazing audition. They go, well, that's what we wanted. And so you have maybe, 10 or 15, adjectives to describe what you're trying to do. And so you kind of have to take that into your brain and then just jump in there and do what you think you should do instinctively.
Right.
So it's like, don't be afraid to jump in there, because basically it's a giant crapshoot anyway, and there is a good chance that if you're competing against hundreds of people, that you're not going to get all that many jobs.
And that if you go in
really
there,
keep at it.
Yeah.
And so, you already don't have the job when you're auditioning. So go for it.
That's a good way
Just
of looking
don't be
at it.
fearful about it. I find myself sometimes, this is advice for me too. I have to be careful not to try to be too, too particular about trying to embody exactly every adjective that they're mentioning. And then that can really inhibit you,
Sure.
when you do that. So I would say skills first. Don't be afraid. Just throw it out there. Just do it.
And it ain't over till it's over.
That's it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, you have a son.
I do.
And I'm guessing you have supersonic hearing, so that had to be hard when he wanted to sneak in the house as a teenager, partying all night and so on. How has being the son of a voice actor with supersonic hearing impacted your son's life?
Well, you know, he sort of inherited it. And he's very good at mimicking people. He's very good at doing voices. He's very musical. But I'm sure it was a little a bit of a challenge for him that I was the voice of his bank while he was in college.
Son, you're overdrawn.
Yes, I'm sorry, Cameron. Your account is now overdrawn.
Mom! Lovely. Thank you, Siri, Susan.
You are most welcome.
That's great. Coming up next on Collective Knowledge, Ryan Gravel, an urban thinker, author, and founder of the Atlanta Beltline.
One of the most beautiful moments was when this little girl, it was before the trail was built, it was just a sea of kudzu right out here, right outside the window here. I was walking down this little footpath that used to follow it. This little girl was having her birthday on it. She was just so in love with the Beltline as an idea that she wanted to have her birthday. She was like 10 years old. It's really beautiful. So, you know, it's changing people's lives. And the way it works is that it was a barrier between communities.
Yes.
And now it's the meeting ground. So physically people come to meet together. So you're connecting communities along the way, but also across the track.
Don't forget to share this episode, like us, or send us a comment. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and please subscribe to our channel on YouTube.